Now, why don't you tell us the whole story right from the beginning? All right, from the beginning. This is the city, Los Angeles, California. My name's Friday. I carry a badge. Police officers.
You any idea who the other man was?
My partner's Bill Gannon.
Program?
We got just one big question.
Yeah.
When?
Now on MeTV Fresno, Xfinity 187.
Hi, I'm John Malice. Welcome to this live edition of Connect with me on the showroom floor at Ventura TV on this Monday morning. Glad to have you along. It's on the air, off the presses. We're going to be touching on all sorts of things today. Mainly, we'll be talking about the viewership being down overall, nationwide and here in the Central Valley, perhaps, in terms of television news viewership. Your phone calls are important. 436 MeTV option 11. Do call in, but also do turn the sound down when you do, because otherwise we won't be able to hear you. Back with our show in a moment.
Tonight I want to discuss the importance of the television medium to the American people.
And we're back here on the showroom floor at Ventura TV. Hope you had a great weekend watching all those football games. Of course, they were great. It was playoff weekend, of course, in the NFL. Had 4 games on tap, but 2 Saturday and 2 Sunday. Of course, the 49ers won, and a lot of people around here in the Central Valley are happy about that. But today, it's on the air, off the presses. We're talking about television news. What has television news become these days? I've been in television news since the 70s, and it certainly has changed dramatically in every phase of the game. But recently, in the last few years, a couple of movies have come out, and the one, of course, recently, Anchorman 2, kind of, pokes fun at television news, with Will Ferrell, of course, serving as the main focal point, the character in Anchorman 2. And so let's take a look at the clip from Anchorman 2. If you haven't seen it, you might get a kick out of watching this just for a minute.
From deep in the hinterlands to the greatest metropolis on Earth, they came to reclaim the glory they once knew.
Welcome to GNN, the Global News Network.
Tell us about the new head honcho.
Linda Jackson is a winner.
Linda Jackson, how are you, my friend?
This is Linda.
Oh, black. Black.
Bronze.
Black.
Aren't you the guy who lost his job to his wife?
Wow, right on the lens.
I'm sorry, sweetie, you're the best. Quick kiss.
Undaunted by the challenges they faced, they would not rest until they were number 1 again.
You're not black or Asian.
I'm gay.
Do you sleep in a coffin?
No, that's vampires.
Are you allowed to be out in the sun?
Those are also vampires.
Are you a vampire?
We just...
The big question is, after watching both of these movies, has television news across the board, locally and nationally, become, just like Anchorman 2, Ron Burgundy? They're making fun of television news. Great movie, Anchorman 2. Live in our studio now to talk about the movie and to talk about real-life television news is our guy, Dennis Hart. He's been in the news business many years, probably as long as I have, maybe a little bit longer, who knows. But your phone calls are important today. 436 MeTV option 11. We'll also touch on some other things. How many news people do you recognize without actually saying the name? We'll put some pictures up on the screen, and we'll talk about the Fresno radio ratings. We'll also talk a little bit about football. Hey, it's kind of a hodgepodge today. 436 MeTV option 11. Do turn down the sound when you call in. We're back with our program. Should be a good one today in a moment.
When you like Ventura TV Appliance on Facebook, it's nice. But when you love the Samsung big screen we deliver, it's even better. Our website is cool, and it's a good place to start. But you really should touch the merchandise before you buy. Time for that upgrade to an HD 3D web-enabled Samsung TV. Get the best selection, price, and service in town without waiting. Come in to Ventura TV Appliance and touch the merchandise today.
Back here with the show and talking about television news and what has television news become. Has television news lost its way, lost credibility with the viewers? Are we covering more celebrity type news, news that doesn't pertain to hard news like war, like the economy, and what's going on in politics? Dennis Hart is here to talk about all this.
The answer is yes. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year, Dennis. I haven't seen you since when?
December.
Last month?
last year.
Last year. Oh, man. So did I kind of depict it pretty well in the monologue, just saying that Anchorman 2 with Ron Burgundy is kind of a takeoff on what's going on today?
Yeah, there's more truth to that than people who don't work in television news realize, because this is a parody of television news, obviously. It's a funny movie. I laughed my rear off during the course of this thing, but there's a lot of truth in that. What they talked about in the movie, those of you who haven't had a chance to see it, is how television news got devalued, how it started giving people what they wanted to know instead of what they should know, and it happened when he went to this bogus news network, GNN, which is obviously CNN, in the 1980s, and he decides that in order to get ratings, we're going to show people auto crashes and chases and fires, things that really mean nothing to a national audience, but they are visual, and so people will tune in. That's their version of how television news was devalued, and pretty much it's true, by the way.
And of course, in the movie Anchorman 2, one of the focal points was a car chase toward the end.
Yes.
Remember doing the car chase,
yes,
and then
yes.
I don't want to say any more because it might ruin.
Well, in certain
movie
markets,
for some
Los
people.
Angeles, car chases are a very big deal. We all remember the O.J. Simpson car chase, but they do car chases all the time down there. Now think about that. Why do they do that? Because they can, because they have helicopters in the air. Means nothing to virtually anybody. What does it mean on a national scale? About 7 months ago, Fox News cut into a local feed out of Phoenix. You may remember this, in the desert, of a car chase in the desert outside Phoenix, Arizona. Fox News put it on the air nationally as if it were some sort of important story. It was nothing, of course. Nothing, so much so that not even the Phoenix station that had the helicopter up there, whose picture Fox News was putting on the air nationally, they were not putting it on the air locally. It wasn't that big of a story locally, and yet
So
Fox News
let me ask you, should we be covering car chases at all?
Most of the time, no, because how do they possibly impact anybody? First of all, they're mostly in big city. You don't have car chases around here, but we don't have the capability to cover them here. Nobody has a helicopter up there to be able to do that.
Right.
But why do they make any difference? It's sort of like covering house fires. How does that impact you? How does a shooting and wounding or a stabbing and wounding impact you? It doesn't, does it?
Well then, let me ask you, in your opinion, what should local and national news be covering? What's hard news in your opinion?
Oh, well, hard news is anything having to do with local governments, anything having to do with schools and children's safety and health issues. There are plenty of the price of food, etc. Plenty of issues. Right now, people are dying of the flu here in the valley. That's a pretty big story. You ought to be covering that. Car chase. What television news does, and I did it for years as a television news reporter and producer, and I did it pretty well, and I know how to do it. They're very visual, and they're easy for people to see. You go home at night, wow,
but
there's a house on fire.
They do have some kind of impact, do they not? I mean, if we have too many car chases, that's a story, because you're putting the public in danger, right?
Well, yeah, but we don't have too many car chases around here. When's the last car chase we had that you're aware of?
I don't know. But in Los Angeles, you have them
They have them
readily.
periodically, sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so does it become a story in L.A. because they are happening more often than not?
No, it becomes a story because they have the capability of covering the story with their helicopters. And it's an easy story to cover. It's a compelling story, okay? In terms of, but let's get real. It's a sensational story. It means nothing in terms of people's welfare. It really doesn't. And we've got some stuff coming up later in this show about ABC News and how it's devalued itself as a national broadcast because they're covering sensational stories instead of serious stories.
So you're saying we ought to be covering government. We ought to be covering health care. We should be covering... But aren't those stories that turn viewers off?
Well, yeah, but
to a certain extent.
To a certain extent, because
you've heard the term, if it bleeds, it leads.
Because the viewers don't understand them. But that doesn't mean television news shouldn't cover. What's the purpose of television news, okay? It's to get an audience for advertisers. And so we know that that's why they cover these stories. But should that be the purpose of TV news? Or should it be to inform people about what's really important in the community? I'd say both. You can be entertaining and still cover important stories, but the local stations don't do that by and large.
Okay, so before we get into the next part of our conversation, how would would you rate the national news and the local news? Are they doing a good job of covering news the way it ought to be covered?
I think CBS is covering by far the most important stories in the country. They're doing the best job of national news on Scott Pelley's evening newscast and the CBS morning news. NBC is doing okay. ABC is doing, frankly, an abysmal job with the evening news with Diana.
How about
Sawyer.
locally?
Channel 30 does a relatively good job, the best job by far in the city of covering the news. They cover not only the news that's unimportant, the spot news stories, most of them are unimportant, but they also have Gene Higginson covering the city council. He did it with me for years when I was at KMJ Radio. The other stations are, I'm not going to put...
mediocre at best, right?
Helpless, virtually helpless.
Yeah, okay. I want to put a picture up on the screen and see if you can name the anchor. Who is this man that we're going to put up here? Does anybody recognize him? Well, let me tell you something. According to the Pew Research Center, my friend Dennis Hart, only 27% of the viewing public knew who this man was. That is amazing.
That is shocking. I wonder if any of your viewers can call in and tell us who that is. This is shocking because this man's been on the air on a national network for 15 or 20 years, and most of the population has never heard of him.
And according to the Pew Research Center, only 53% could not identify this man.
That's right.
3% identified him as a news anchor. 18% identified him as something other than maybe even Tom Brokaw or Joe Biden, the vice president.
Yeah, that looks a lot like Biden, doesn't it? Biden has that kind of hair, that kind of smile. That's Biden, all right, no question about it.
All right.
That's shocking. Shall we tell him who it is?
Yeah, should we let the cat out of the bag? Go ahead, Dennis.
That would be Brian Williams, the anchor of the #1 top-rated NBC nightly news. Okay, he replaced Tom Brokaw years and years ago. What this shows is how unimportant the nightly news has become, because just 40 years ago, Walter Cronkite, who was anchor of the #1 rated CBS Evening News, was judged the most trusted man in America in a poll by Time magazine because everybody knew Walter Cronkite.
Next photo. Let's put the next photo up and see if you can recognize that man.
Do we know who this is?
Yeah, in 1985, that man... 47% of the country knew who he was, 45% did not. So what does that tell you between 1985 and 2013/14?
More people were watching this man who had the #3 newscast in the country at the time. That's Dan Rather, by the way, of CBS News, Dan Rather. It's because we have more alternatives now with cable television and the internet. People are now deciding they don't want to watch what's really happening. They want to watch news that suits them. They want to put themselves into an information bubble. That's what I call it.
So
you're
saying
only get news that agrees with their viewpoints.
The reason that more people knew who Dan Rather was in 1985, more people were watching network news.
Even though he was the #3 rated newscaster in 1985. Williams is the #1, the top guy, and most people have never seen him. Have no idea.
So that means nearly half the country knew who Dan Rather was.
Right.
Barely 27% know who Brian Williams is.
That's shocking. And it's not as if Brian Williams just got on the air last week or a day ago. He's been on the air for years. Before he became the anchor of nightly news, as you know, he was their key correspondent for years.
He took over for Tom Brokaw, I believe, in 2004.
Yeah, that's 10 years. And he was a reporter for years before that.
Yeah. Talking with Dennis Hart, do you recognize this face or that one? I don't know. I don't know. 436 MeTV option 11. We're here on Connect with Me on MeTV Fresno. We'll continue in just a moment.
1 Adam 12.
This is Adam 12. It stars Martin Milner as Officer Pete Malloy, Kent McCord as Officer Jim Reed.
1 Adam 12, roger.
This black and white patrol car has an overhead valve V8 engine. It develops 325 horsepower at 4,800 RPMs. It accelerates from 0 to 60 in 7 seconds. It has a top speed of 120 miles an hour. The automobile has 2 shotgun racks, one attached to the bottom portion of the front seat, one in the vehicle trunk.
You want me to drive?
Now on MeTV Fresno, Xfinity 187.
Really unbelievable that nobody knows, well, not nobody, but nearly nobody knows who Brian Williams is across the country. And they flashed the photo up on the screen, only 27%. And years ago, nearly half the country knew who Dan Rather was. I'd like to see the numbers on, of course, Tom Brokaw and Peter Jennings back in 1985. We don't have those numbers, but I'm sure they exist somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to talk about a report. It's called the Tyndall Report. These are the top 10 news stories that were covered by the networks in 2013. Let's put that up there. And Dennis Hart, you can comment on these. Look at that. Boston bombing was #1.
Yeah.
Federal budget, health care, Syria and the Civil War, tornado season, the weather, guns, fires, NSA, Syria, and their chemical weapons. CBS, according to the Tyndall report, you can explain what the Tyndall report is.
Yep.
CBS News did the best job of covering these top 10 stories, and why?
Yeah, Andrew Tyndall has been monitoring network news for 25 years. He watches every big three newscast, ABC, NBC, and CBS, and documents what they do moment by moment. And so this is what happened last year, and it shows that by far, as we were talking, you and I have talked off the air about this over the last months, how CBS has become by far the most serious newscast in the United States, covering the most important stories, which include, of course, domestic policy, Obamacare, the gun control debate, the budget crises, etc. Look at what CBS has done here, covering far more of that, the Syria civil war. Remember, we almost got into a war with Syria just a few months ago. Now notice what ABC is covering, and this is what Tyndall documents, and Tyndall puts it this way. They have rejected their mission of presenting a serious newscast. What they're primarily doing is weather, true crime, and celebrity news. ABC has essentially Disneyfied, owned by the Disney Corporation, its national news broadcast with Diane Sawyer. And you can see the difference if you tune in, as I do periodically. Diane Sawyer often leads with stories that have virtually no national impact whatsoever. A guy was caught in an ice floe in Minnesota. A car ran into a river and 3 people were killed in Missouri. Are those worthy of national stories? Those are interesting local stories, important local stories. They rarely, as you see, and Tyndall documents this, they rarely cover, even though their title is World News, they hardly ever cover world news.
Got a call coming in. Good morning. You're on Connect with Me. Your question.
Yeah, I got one question. Why don't you guys concentrate more on local news instead of worrying about something that happened in Texas? It don't concern us at all. You know, let the national news handle that kind of garbage. And as what you said a while ago, I believe that's a very true fact. We should be, what used to have crusades against gangs and against drugs and, you know, things like this. But you guys are out there pussyfooting around with things that don't even concern us.
We guys are? I'm pussyfooting around? What am I pussyfooting around about?
No, we're just...
Having things outside of California and Fresno. You know,
we have to... Listen, I think...
Looking for things that are disappointing. You know, give them something to look forward to.
Let me suggest that when a national network covers the federal budget debate or the rollout of Obamacare, that affects everybody in Fresno. Thousands of people in Fresno have health insurance problems. When we talk about the gun debate, the firearms debate, which CBS has covered more than any other network, that affects everybody in Fresno because we have a murder rate that's outrageous in Fresno.
Local news?
Oh, it is local news. You don't think gun violence happens in Fresno?
You don't cover it enough.
We don't cover it enough. I think the stations cover gun violence every night. How much more can they do?
Get out there in the streets with some of these Christian people and help them out. Bring back the neighborhoods.
All right.
I appreciate the phone call. Thank you for the thoughts here on Connect with Me. But the point of this is, and put that back up there one more time, that graphic. The point of this is, and I don't know if the point got lost, CBS News did a better job and had more coverage of the serious topics than NBC and ABC combined, like the Boston bombing, the federal budget, Obamacare, Syria, and so forth. In fact, what ABC focused on, according to this report, was winter weather. That was most of their coverage. And NBC, they cover wildfires, as you know, big time.
CBS has become the most serious national broadcast under Scott Pelley, the most serious, important stories. For anybody to say that Obamacare is not an important story, or gun control is not an important story, or the government shutdown is not important.
Well, even the Boston bombing is important to us here because it could happen here.
Absolutely. Now, this is not to say that people who watch ABC News are dumb or stupid. Nobody's going to say that. ABC has put together a newscast, which I call a national version of eyewitness news. Eyewitness news, which ABC pioneered.
Do you want to see what Andrew Tyndall had to say about ABC News? Let's put that quote up on the screen. You can read it for yourself, Dennis. As a matter of fact, there it is. Go ahead and read that, Dennis. Go ahead and read it.
Tyndall concluded that out of the 3 networks, ABC News spent, as we know, the least number of minutes on domestic and foreign policy stories, and pronounced that the network is now certifiable Disneyfied, that's a great line, for its coverage of weather, true crime, and celebrity news.
What does that mean?
It means that they're not doing a serious national broadcast. They're doing a national version of Eyewitness News. And Eyewitness News became famous for its happy talk, for its coverage of sensational stories and stories that impacted 1 or 2 people. It's a fascinating thing.
That's an incredible quote, though.
It is.
I looked at that quote and I about fell out of my chair. Is ABC News outraged? Did they have a response to it?
Yeah, they say, well, now wait. great. Our ratings are going, they're doing fine, and they are, because as H.L. Mencken said, a great newspaper columnist from decades ago, nobody ever went broke underestimating the intelligence of the American public. There's an audience for that. ABC's turned Good Morning America into a clown show, as you know. It's turned the World News Tonight into a soft, feature-oriented newscast. It's fascinating what they've done. They've decided that to win, they're going to dumb down the audience and dumb down their stories.
I've got to tell you, the ABC News with Diane Sawyer has become unwatchable for me. And I'm going to say it. It's unwatchable. And Brian Williams is almost unwatchable because of the coverage they have. When you look at Scott Pelley, why would you want to watch any other national newscast?
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, I agree. If you want a serious newscast, if you want to know what's going on across the country, there was a night about a week ago, I tuned in for the full ABC News. They had story after story with Diane Sawyer about this guy caught in this ice flow somewhere, this guy in a river somewhere. Nothing of importance. Those were all local stories, and they did it on a national basis. And, of course, she comes out with her compelling... Her presentation is, oh, this is such a terrible story, I have to tell you.
Yeah.
Oh, this story is so terrible. Just watch this and see how terrible it is. Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah.
She's unwatchable.
You got to wonder who's watching these things. I don't know. Anyway, we're talking with Dennis Hart. Your phone calls are important, even if you disagree with us, even if you don't recognize this old face or that old face or any old face. Who knows? 436 MeTV option 11. Turn down the sound. Call in, even if you disagree. Back in a moment.
When you're looking for Whirlpool innovation and quality, who has the answers, the selection, the price? Ventura TV Appliance. With billions in nationwide appliance buying power, more than Home Depot and Best Buy combined, will help you save. Our low prices on Energy Star qualified Whirlpool appliances save you energy and money, and pay no interest on select models when paid in full within 12 months. Ventura TV Appliance, serving you since 1951.
My friends, we are not done with our quiz today here on Connect With Me. Let's put the next photo up and see if you recognize the man in the middle, right there, the only man. Who is that?
Now, this guy's been a friend of mine, just as a hint, for probably 25 or 30 years. That's all I'm going to say. I've known this guy for 30 years.
Nice guy.
Nice guy. Nice guy.
He's been on this show twice, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
Well respected. I like his delivery. I like it. Anyway, shall we say who it is?
Why don't you say who it is? Go ahead.
It's Bud Elliott of KC24.
Of KC24. Now, if you don't recognize him, it's likely because KC has fallen on hard times ratings-wise, as has Channel 47, and in the last rating book, virtually nobody was watching them. But, Bud is a nice guy.
He's one of the most recognizable faces, I think, in the Central Valley. He's been on for years, since the 80s. Next, who is that
Much
man?
easier to recognize. Let's see if people want to call in and guess who that is. He's probably the most recognizable news anchor in the Valley because he's on the #1 station. And
do you think more people recognize him than Bud Elliott at this point?
I think so. I would think so. Okay, because again, the volume of their audience, their ratings are so dramatically big. Okay, so yeah, he's pretty recognized. Nice guy as well, by the way.
Yeah, nice
known
guy.
him for a long time.
Yeah, Warren Armstrong of ABC Channel 30.
ABC
All right,
30.
next. All right, where does he fit in, Dennis?
Well, unfortunately, nice guy again. Okay,
Yeah.
very nice guy. But this guy has had the misfortune of working at a television station that for decades has had no ratings in Fresno. I would be surprised if people in your audience had recognized him. Again, nice guy.
Ken Malloy.
Ken Malloy of Channel 47,
Right.
Eyewitness News. Now, the new Eyewitness News used to be 47 on your
Right.
side and all that stuff. But again, because TV news is so devalued, so few people are watching these days.
You would venture to say that out of those three news anchors, those local anchors, if all three walked down the street, you would venture to say that Warren Armstrong would be recognizable more than the other two.
I would think so because of the ratings, yeah.
Now,
the most recognizable people on television, in terms of not news, but what they all did, Angelo Stallis, and this was every survey that ever came, Angelo Stallis and Kopi Soteropoulos, of course. Because
I'll bet you could throw Nancy Osborne in there.
Nancy, of course, very recognizable. Yeah. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story. Just a month ago, a friend of mine were in Costco, our favorite Costco, having lunch. The $1.50 lunch that they have, the Polish dog and all this. There's an ad for Costco. And I'm speaking to my friend, and a couple of people are next to me, don't even notice them. And finally, one of them, the young lady, a middle-aged lady, taps me on the shoulder and says, "Are you Dennis Hart?" And I said, "Well, yeah, but how would you know that?" She said, "Well, I've listened to you for years on KMJ. I recognized your voice." The voice. And I've had that happen 2 or 3 times at Costco. That's why I go to Costco, for the props. You know, I like to have people recognize me. And, of course, it's the name tag I wear, Dennis Hart.
Right. Well, and, you know, all kidding aside, very good, very intriguing story. They recognize me because of the voice.
Yes.
Not necessarily the face.
Right.
It's the voice.
Right. Because when they see you in the store, you're not dressed the way you are now. And they're not used to seeing you dressed shabbily, like we all dress on weekends and all this. I wear shorts and a T-shirt when I go into stores. Who's going to recognize that? I used to be on television and all this stuff.
Well, I wear a Giants and a 49ers or Raiders sweatshirt.
I understand.
Sunglasses and hat.
I understand.
They still
I understand.
recognize it. No, they don't.
Point being, though, the TV news, again, people are getting the news from a variety of different sources now, making their own newscast, deciding what they want to watch on the basis of what they want to hear, not what's important.
All right, radio ratings, KMJ's down.
yeah.
Let's put them up on the screen here.
Yeah.
What numbers are we looking at here on the screen?
You are looking at the December trend numbers, not the final rating numbers for the fall book, the ratings book. These are trend numbers, a 1 month look. The fall numbers came out about a week ago. They're slightly different from this, and it shows KMJ is even farther down than it is here. What's shocking about this, KBOS is still number 1 in the entire book.
I see.
KMJ is now down to a 3.5 share of the audience in the fall of this past year. That is probably...
And the FM is even further down.
Yeah. KMJ probably has its lowest share of audience now that it's had, I'm going to guess, in close to a half century. It was number 1 about 2 years ago, number 1 until recently. It had a 9.1 share of the audience. Now it's down to 3.5. That is disastrous for KMJ. It's going to lead to, I'm afraid, big trouble for some of my friends over there in terms of their future jobs.
And the big question is, if you're an advertiser or you're a big shot in broadcasting, the question is, you're looking at these numbers and you're going, why is this happening? That's the question.
It's happened because KMJ lost virtually every recognizable voice over the last couple of years. Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity were poached by another station, and they went to that station. Then, in the last 6 or 7 months, KMJ's lost virtually every news voice that they had over the last years. I left. I finally retired after working part-time in retirement for them.
You did a great job over
there. Thank you. I loved working at KMJ.
I listened to your reports on the way to work.
You're very kind.
Morning.
You're very kind. We lost Brianna Phillips. We lost Eddie Lopez. And we also lost Greg Neff to replace Dad. So they've lost virtually everybody who was doing news for them over. So with all those voices being
that's
lost,
the difference.
People are no longer tuning in. And I think you're in a period where there's not a lot of major news going on, no political campaigns or anything. People are tuning out of News Talk Radio.
Quickly, in 10 seconds, so people don't want all those local talk shows on KMJ?
No, I think they want an entertaining, nationalized Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity.
They want a mix.
Will always do a better job than the local guys who are only whining about water rates and traffic and all that. And that's not interesting to people most
Measure
of the time.
G.
Yeah, Measure G. I think we've had enough of that garbage.
Yeah. All right. It was NFL playoff weekend, of course. 4 games on tap, 2 Saturday, 2 Sunday. The Niners won. Let's roll a videotape before we run out of time. The Niners won big time, Dennis. No doubt about it. Kaepernick had a big game after a slow start. And, he threw a touchdown pass, ran for another. That questionable call, of course, to Vernon Davis. But talking to you about this earlier.
Yep.
There is no big game announcer. The only big game announcer that we had over the weekend was Jim Nance.
Right. I didn't even recognize the Fox announcer who was doing the Saturday afternoon game.
Who was it?
I don't know. I didn't recognize it. The days of Kirk Gowdy, Dick Enberg, they're long gone. Those were personalities by themselves. Yeah. Everybody knew them. In terms of the games itself, 49ers, I think, are the best team remaining in the playoffs. It would not surprise me to see them go into Seattle and beat Seattle, though that's the toughest venue in football, as you know, to win if you're not the home team. But the 49ers are a solid defensive and offensive team. Kaepernick's not the best quarterback in football, but he's got one of the best coaches and one of the best schemes.
Yeah, he really does. But getting back to the announcers and the broadcasting aspect of it, from a video perspective, they have so many cameras. They've got that one camera that hangs above with a wire above the field, so you go, it's kind of like a bird's eye view of the field and the players. You didn't have that years ago when Kurt Gowdy and Dick Enberg were doing games.
That's right.
Okay, so that brings a new perspective into your living room, does it not? Aside from the broadcasters who are a bunch of no-names.
Yeah, the broadcasters are no-names, not because the technology has overwhelmed them, but because they are no longer the personalities who cover all those major events. For example, I wonder how many people even knew who Joe Buck was yesterday. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
He's Jack Buck's son, and the reason he has the job at Fox is because he's the great Jack Buck's son. Jack Buck, the great announcer for the St. Louis Cardinals, network announcer, et cetera, et cetera.
Of our day, right now in 2014, who's the best big game announcer in football and baseball?
Best big game announcer for pro football, I think, is Al Michaels. For college football, no question, Brent Musburger on ESPN and ABC. In terms of baseball, I don't know. I don't think you have a big name announcer on baseball.
No more.
Scully doing the Dodgers on radio, of course.
All right, got to go. going to be cut off.
All right.
It's over already.
I recognize your face.
Yeah,
and your voice.
Who are you?
Exactly.
Thanks for being here, by the way. I listen to KNBR now on the way to work. Anyway, we're back tomorrow with another edition of Connect with Me on MeTV Fresno. We'll have the owner of Haven's Locksmith here in Fresno. See you tomorrow.